The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was bigger than most cities on Earth. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds could form inside it. The walls were made of crystal that glowed with soft blue light, making everything look like it was underwater. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled the enormous space. Their voices created a sound like ocean waves, mixed with thunder. In the center of the hall stood a platform that looked like it was carved from a single piece of black stone. On this platform sat the Council Prime Zelthan. He was 12 feet tall and looked like he was made of living diamond. His body caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns that hurt to look at directly. When he spoke, his voice sounded like breaking glass, but somehow everyone could understand him perfectly. The emergency meeting had been called because of the Vorthak Empire. They were a race of creatures that looked like giant lizards covered in metal armor they had been taking over star systems for the past 50 years. Every time another species tried to stop them, the Vorthak would crush them completely. Then they would take all the survivors and make them Slavasaltan raised one of his crystal arms, and the hall fell. Silent, the sound of thousands of voices stopped so suddenly that ears popped from the change in pressure. He looked around the hall with eyes that burned like tiny stars. The Vorthak have taken the Kepler system, he said, his voice carried to every corner of the massive hall. They destroyed the Altarian defense fleet in less than 6 hours. 3 billion beings are now slaves. The Vorthak are moving toward the core worlds. A sound like wind through dead leaves filled the hall. It was the sound of fear from dozens of different species. The core worlds were the heart of galactic civilization. If they fell, the galaxy would belong to the Vorthak Empire. In the back of the hall sat a human. The other species barely noticed him because humans were new to the council. They had only discovered faster than light travel 20 years ago. Most aliens thought humans were weak and primitive. The human looked small compared to the giants around him. He had black hair and calm dark eyes. His name was Kyung Ho, and he was Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council. Every species has tried to fight the Vorthak, continued Zelthan. The Nexari sent their famous war fleets. The Centauri brought their planet-killing weapons. The Zephyrians used their mind control powers. Nothing worked. The Vorthak adapt to every weapon, every tactic, every strategy we use against them. The hall filled with worried voices again. Everyone was talking at once, trying to find some solution that no one had thought of before. Some suggested running away to the outer rim of the galaxy. Others wanted to try forming an alliance with species that had never joined the Council. A few even suggested surrendering and hoping the Vorthak would be merciful. Kyung Ho listened to all the arguing. He watched the way the different species moved and talked. He noticed that they all seemed to think the same way. They all wanted to fight the Vorthak using bigger weapons or more ships or better technology, but the Vorthak had already proven they could beat any traditional military force. After 3 hours of arguing, Zelthan called for order again. We have discussed every option, he said. The Council must face reality. The Vorthak cannot be defeated by conventional means. We must begin evacuation of the threatened sectors. Kyung Ho stood up slowly. The movement was small, but something about it caught attention. Alien heads turned toward him. Conversations stopped. The human looked calm and confident, even though he was surrounded by beings who could crush him without effort. What if there was another way, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the hall. He spoke perfect galactic standard, even though humans had only been learning it for 20 years. The Nexari delegate Vextar made a sound like metal scraping against stone. He was 8 feet tall with silver skin and 4 arms. His species had the most powerful military in the galaxy before the Vorthak came. The humans want to help, he said. The word sounded like an insult. Your species has no real military. Your whole planet was at war with itself until 50 years ago. You have never fought anyone but each other. Other species began making sounds of agreement. The Altarians chittered like insects. The Zephyrians hummed in harmony. The Centauri growled low in their throats. They all thought the same thing. Humans were too new, too weak, too primitive to help with something this serious. Kyung Ho waited for the noise to stop. He did not look angry or upset. He looked like someone who was thinking carefully about a difficult problem that might be exactly what we need, he said. Every species here has tried to fight the Vorthak using traditional military tactics. Every species has failed. The Vorthak know how to beat conventional armies. They have studied every military doctrine in the galaxy. They know exactly what to expect. He paused and looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of worlds. They expect formation fighting, he continued. They expect big ships with heavy weapons. They expect battle plans that follow the rules of warfare. They expect enemies who fight the way enemies are supposed to fight. The hall was completely quiet now, even the background of the building system seemed to stop. Everyone was listening to the small human who spoke with such confidence. But humans do not fight the way we are supposed to fight, Kyung-ho said. We have never followed the rules because we never learned them properly. We learn to fight by fighting each other, and humans are very good at thinking of new ways to hurt each other. Some of the aliens shifted uncomfortably. They had studied human history. They knew about the thousands of wars that had covered Earth. They knew humans had invented terrible weapons and used them on their own species. The Vorthek have defeated every traditional military force they have encountered, Kyung-ho continued. They know how to beat fleets that fight in formation. They know how to counter weapons that follow standard designs. They know how to predict tactics that come from military academies. Smiled slightly, and the expression was somehow both friendly and dangerous. But they have never fought humans. They have never encountered a species that treats every rule as a suggestion. They have never faced an enemy that looks at the impossible and asks, what would happen if we tried it anyway? The silence in the hall was so complete that individual heartbeats could be heard from different species. The crystalline beings made tiny ringing sounds. The gas-based life forms whispered like wind. The mechanical species clicked, and words softly Sultan spoke into the silence. What exactly are you proposing? Human, give us one chance, Kyung-ho said. One battle, one opportunity to try something the Vorthak have never seen before. If we fail, you lose nothing that you would not lose anyway. The Vorthak will destroy us just like they have destroyed everyone else. He looked directly at Zelfin, and his dark eyes were completely steady. But if we succeed, you might discover that the galaxy is much stranger and more dangerous than the Vorthak ever imagined. The debate that followed lasted for 6 hours. Species argued in languages that had never been spoken in the same room before. Mathematical concepts were explained using interpretive dance. Philosophical points were made through the exchange of chemical compounds. The humans sat quietly through all of it, waiting patiently for a decision. Some species thought the human proposal was suicide. Others wondered if desperation had driven the council to consider impossible solutions. A few delegates privately thought that watching the humans get destroyed might provide useful information about Vorthak tactics. In the end, the vote was close. Many species abstained, believing that the outcome would be the same regardless. The Vorthak would win and the galaxy would fall, but enough delegates voted yes to give the humans their chance. As the session ended, Kyung-ho gathered his few belongings. Most of the other delegates avoided looking at him. They had just voted to send an entire species to their death. Even the ones who had voted yes did not expect the humans to survive. But as Kyung-ho walked toward the exit, he was smiling. It was not the smile of someone who expected to die. It was the smile of someone who had just been given permission to solve a very interesting problem. And humans, as the galaxy was about to discover, were very, very good at solving problems that everyone else thought were impossible. Message was sent to Earth that same day. Humanity had been given permission to face the Vorthak Empire. The species that had never fought anyone but themselves were about to teach the galaxy what war really meant. 3 weeks had passed since the Galactic Council made their desperate decision. The Kepler 442 system hung in space like a jewel waiting to be stolen. It had 7 planets with billions of people living peaceful lives. They had no idea that death was coming for them in the form of the Vorthak Empire. The Council monitoring station hung in the outer edge of the system like a metal moon. Its sensors could detect a single ship from 1,000 light-years away. The station was filled with military observers from every major species in the galaxy. They had come to watch what they believed would be the final destruction of humanity. General Keth Reese of the Altarian fleet stood in the main observation deck. His 4 eyes moved constantly between the sensor displays and the empty space beyond the viewports. He was 7 feet tall with blue-gray skin that looked like polished stone. His species had fought the Vorthak 3 times and lost every battle. This is madness, he muttered to himself. The humans are going to be slaughtered. Beside him stood Admiral Vextar of the Nexari. His silver skin reflected the light from the displays, making him look like a living statue. His forearms moved independently as he operated multiple control panels at once. The sensor readings make no sense, he said. His voice sounded like metal grinding against metal. Look at these fleet compositions. The displays showed the approaching human fleet, and nothing about it followed standard military doctrine. The humans had brought hundreds of ships, but they were all wrong. The vessels were too small, too varied, too chaotic. There were converted cargo ships, modified mining platforms, repurposed civilian transports, and things that looked like they had been built in someone's backyard. Where are their battleships? Asked Commander Yith Kal of the Centauri Alliance. Her tentacles writhed nervously as she studied the sensor data. Where are their carriers, their heavy cruisers, their planet killers? The human fleet looked like a collection of space junk held together with hope and desperation. Some ships appeared to be welded together from multiple smaller vessels. Others had equipment bolted to their hulls that clearly had not been designed for space combat. A few looked like they might fall apart if they turned too quickly. Admiral, hey, one commanded the human fleet from what had once been a simple cargo hauler. The ship was called the Persistence, and it had been modified so many times that its original design was completely hidden. The bridge was cramped and filled with jury-rigged equipment that hummed and sparked. One was a small woman with short black hair and hands that were stained from years of working with machinery. She wore a simple gray uniform that looked more like work clothes than a military dress. She had never attended a military academy, had never commanded a proper warship, had never even seen combat outside of training simulations. Her tactical officer Dong Su sat at a station that looked like it had been built from spare computer parts. He was simultaneously monitoring 17 different communication channels while eating what appeared to be a rice ball. His uniform was wrinkled and his hair was messy, but his eyes never left his displays. Communications officer Nari looked up from her console. Admiral, the Vorthak fleet has entered the system. They are broadcasting their standard surrender demand. The main view screen showed the approaching Vorthak fleet, and it was a sight that had terrified the galaxy for 50 years. 200 massive warships moved in perfect formation. Each ship was over a mile long and bristled with enough weapons to destroy a planet. The formation was a perfect wedge designed to concentrate maximum firepower on any enemy leading. The fleet was the Vorthak flagship Dominator. It was 3 miles long and carried enough firepower to level continents. Commander Zethkar stood on its bridge surrounded by officers who had never lost a battle. The bridge was vast and dark with displays that showed tactical information in glowing red symbol. Zethkar was 8 feet tall with black scales that looked like armor. His eyes were yellow and cold like a snake preparing to strike. Scars covered his hide, each one a trophy from a different battle. He had personally overseen the conquest of 47 worlds. Patch me through to the human commander, he ordered. His voice was like gravel being crushed under steel. The view screen on the Persistence flickered to life, showing Zethkar in all his terrifying glory. Most species trembled when they saw him for the first time. His presence radiated menace and power. Entire civilizations had surrendered rather than face him in battle. Human insects, he said, his voice carrying easily across space. You have made a grave mistake coming here. Your pathetic fleet will be nothing but debris in 1 hour. Surrender now, and I will make your deaths quick. One looked at the Vorthak commander with the same expression she might use to examine a broken engine. She leaned back in her chair and actually smiled. The expression seemed to confuse Zethkar, who was used to seeing fear in his enemy's eyes. That is very kind of you, Commander, she said in perfect Vorthak. Unfortunately, we will have to decline your generous offer. You see, we have come here to solve a problem, and humans are very good at solving problems. Zethkar felt something he had not experienced in decades. Confusion. The human was not afraid. She was not begging for mercy or trying to negotiate. She was talking to him like they were discussing the weather. You would dare threaten the Vorthak Empire, he snarled. Your fleet looks like it was assembled from garbage. Your ships have no weapons, no armor, no hope of victory. One nodded thoughtfully. You are absolutely right, Commander. Our ships are mostly converted civilian vessels. Our weapons are improvised. Our armor is whatever we could bolt onto the hulls. And you know what that is exactly what makes this interesting? She leaned forward slightly, and her smile became something that made Zethkar feel uncomfortable for the first time in his military career. You have defeated every traditional fleet you have encountered, she continued. You know exactly how military formations work. You understand standard tactics, you can predict conventional strategies, but, Commander, have you ever fought someone who does not know the rules? The view screen went dark, leaving Zethkar staring at his own reflection. He turned to his tactical officer, a lean Vorthak with silver scales. What do you make of their fleet composition? He asked. The officer studied his displays for several minutes. Sir, their formation makes no tactical sense. They have no clear command structure, no obvious battle plan, no standard weapon systems. I cannot predict what they intend to do because what they are doing appears to be impossible around the Vorthak flagship. The rest of the fleet moved into attack formation. 200 warships arranged themselves in the pattern that had brought victory in countless battles. The formation was perfect textbook military doctrine that had been refined over centuries of warfare on. The human ships' alarms began to sound, but they were not the sharp military alerts that other species used. Instead, they played music old Earth, songs that spoke of home and determination and the refusal to give up. The crews moved to their stations with the casual efficiency of people who had spent their lives fixing things that were broken. The Vorthak fleet began its advance, moving forward like a wall of destruction. The humans waited, watching the enemy approach with what looked like complete calm. Some crews were still eating lunch, others were making last-minute repairs to their improvised weapons. A few were actually playing games while they waited. This cannot be right, muttered General Kethrees on the monitoring station. The humans show no signs of battle preparation. They are not even trying to form defensive positions. Admiral Vextar watched the sensor displays in growing amazement. The human fleet had spread out across a huge area of space with no apparent pattern. Their ships were moving independently with no visible coordination. It looked like chaos. Commander Zethkar felt a growing sense of unease as his fleet approached. Weapons range, something was wrong. The humans were not behaving like any enemy he had ever faced. They showed no fear, no desperation, no last-minute attempts to escape or negotiate. When the Vorthak fleet reached optimal firing range, something impossible happened. The human fleet simply vanished. Every single ship disappeared from sensors in the same instant, leaving empty space where hundreds of vessels had been moments before impossible. Roared Zethkar. Where did they go? His sensor officer frantically worked his controls, running every scan available. Nothing. Sir, it is as if they never existed. What Zethkar did not know was that humans had learned something important during their centuries of warfare on Earth. Sometimes the best way to win a fight was to make sure the enemy could not find you. The technology was not advanced by galactic standards, but it was something no other species had ever developed. Stealth systems designed not just to hide, but to completely disappear. Admiral Hay one watched from her invisible ship as the Vorthak fleet spread out in confusion, searching for an enemy that seemed to have evaporated. They are looking for us, she said calmly. Dongsu, what does their formation look like now? Breaking apart, Admiral. Individual ships are separating to search wider areas. They are abandoning their tight formation. Perfect, she replied. Now we show them what humans learned in the dark places of Earth, where the strong prey on the weak and the clever survive. She opened a communication channel to the entire human fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Haywan. The enemy has taken the bait. They have broken formation and isolated their vessels. Now we teach them why humans learn to hunt in packs. Commence Operation Swarm. The Vorthak heavy cruiser Annihilator drifted through space, scanning for enemies that seemed to exist only as ghosts. Captain Morketh stood on his bridge, watching displays that showed nothing but empty space. His crew was nervous and confused. They had never encountered an enemy that could simply disappear. Sir, reported his sensor officer, we are detecting some kind of energy signatures, but they are too faint to lock onto it. It's almost like background radiation. Morketh growled low in his throat. Keep scanning. Expand the search pattern. The humans cannot have simply vanished into nothing. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The space around the Annihilator suddenly filled with small ships that seemed to materialize from nothing. Dozens of human vessels appeared in perfect coordination. Moving like a school of fish or a flock of birds, the human ships were tiny compared to the Vorthak cruiser. Each one was barely larger than a fighter craft, but they moved with a precision that seemed impossible without any visible communication or command structure. They flowed around the Annihilator like water around a stone. Captain Jin Ho commanded one of the human vessels from what had once been an asteroid mining ship. The craft was ugly and improvised, but it moved through space with the grace of something that had been born there. His crew consisted of miners and engineers who had learned to work in the harshest conditions imaginable. Target their sensor arrays first, he told his wing of 12 ships. Cut off their ability to see what we are doing. The human ships struck like lightning, hitting dozens of targets. Simultaneously, the Vorthak cruiser tried to bring its massive weapons to bear, but it was like trying to swat flies with a sledgehammer. The human vessels were too small, too fast, and too coordinated. What are they doing? Screamed the Annihilator sensor officer. Sir, they are not using standard weapons. They appear to be using industrial equipment. It was true. The human ships carried mining lasers, cutting torches, plasma welders, and other tools that had been designed for construction work. The equipment had been modified and weaponized, but it was still recognizably civilian technology. Captain Unesio guided her converted cargo hauler toward the Annihilator hull. Her ship carried a crew of former shipyard workers who knew exactly how to take apart a vessel. Her mining laser began cutting through the Vorthak armor like it was paper. We know how to crack rocks, she said to her crew over the communication system. Turns out spaceships are not much different. Annihilator captain watched in horror as human ships attached themselves to his hull like metallic parasites. Their industrial equipment began systematically dismantling his vessel piece by piece. It was not elegant military combat, it was demolition work carried out with terrifying efficiency. All around the Annihilator, similar scenes played out. The human swarm moved as one organism, but each ship acted independently. They had no rigid command structure, no predetermined battle plan. Instead, they adapted to each situation as it developed. On the monitoring station, General Kethris stared at the displays in complete bewilderment. This is impossible, he said. How are they coordinating without a central command? How do they know what each other is doing? Admiral Vextar was equally confused. Every ship in their fleet seems to know exactly where every other ship is. They move like they share a single mind, but our sensors detect no communication between them. What the aliens did not understand was that humans had developed something revolutionary during their early space exploration. Quantum communication networks allowed every human ship to share information instantly across any distance. Each vessel knew the exact position, status, and intentions of every other ship in the fleet. The coordination was not magical or impossible. It was simply technology that other species had never thought to develop because they had always relied on traditional command structures and communication methods. They had never seen the need for such intimate coordination. Commander Zethkar watched his fleet being systematically dismantled by an enemy he could not understand. The humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered. They used civilian equipment as weapons, treated warfare like a construction project, and moved with coordination that seemed to defy physics. Reform the fleet, he ordered desperately. Tight formation, overlapping fields of fire, but it was too late. The human swarms had already identified the fundamental weakness in Vorthak tactics, their dependence on rigid formations and predetermined strategies. While Vorthak officers waited for orders and followed established doctrine, the humans adapted in real time to every change in the battlefield. The Vorthak battleship destroyer found itself surrounded by what appeared to be a cloud of mechanical insects. The human ships moved in 3 dimensions, using the full scope of space in ways that the Vorthak, with their traditional naval tactics, had never considered. Captain Wu Jin led his group of converted passenger ships against the destroyer. His vessels had been luxury liners before the war, but they moved through space with the coordination of a professional dance troupe. Each ship knew exactly where it needed to be and when the destroyer tried to rotate to bring its weapons to bear, but the human ships moved faster than it could turn. They struck and vanished, wearing down the massive vessel through hundreds of small attacks. The destroyer communications officer reported in panic, "They are everywhere. We cannot target them effectively." Their ships are too small and too coordinated, the destroyer. Captain felt something he had never experienced before in his military career: helplessness. His massive ship with its planet killing weapons was being taken apart by enemies that fought like no warrior code had ever imagined. The human ships attached themselves to the destroyer hull and began their terrible work. Mining equipment designed to extract ore from asteroids proved equally effective at removing armor plating from warships. Construction tools meant for building space stations became weapons of incredible precision, but the most terrifying thing was not the effectiveness of the human attack, it was the attitude of the attackers themselves. They did not fight with the fury of warriors or the discipline of soldiers. They worked with the calm efficiency of people who had been given an interesting problem to solve. Captain Parkman commanded a converted research vessel that had once studied deep space phenomena. His crew consisted of scientists and technicians who approached warfare with the same methodical precision they used for their experiments. Structural analysis shows weak points in the enemy armor, he reported to his team. Apply cutting torches to coordinates 7-7 Mark IV. Results should be optimal. The human ships did not scream battle cries or issue challenges. They simply went about their work with the professional competence of people who had been trained to fix broken things, and to them the Vorthak fleet was just another collection of broken things that needed to be repaired. The battle was not a clash of warriors or a contest of honor. It was a demonstration of human problem-solving abilities applied to the question of how to dismantle a hostile fleet as quickly and efficiently as possible. Vorthak had spent centuries perfecting the art of war, but the humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of taking things apart and putting them back together in ways that worked better, and in the cold vacuum of space, those skills proved to be exactly what was needed. Commander Zethkar realized with growing horror that he was not just losing a battle, he was witnessing the birth of an entirely new form of warfare. The humans had not simply defeated his tactics, they had made them obsolete. The age of traditional space combat was ending right before his eyes, and the creatures responsible were not mighty warriors or brilliant generals. They were mechanics and miners and engineers who had looked at the problem of warfare and decided to solve it the same way they solved every other problem, by taking it apart piece by piece until they understood how it worked, and then using that knowledge to build something better. The Vorthak Empire had ruled through fear for over 2 centuries. Their massive fleets had crushed every resistance, brought order to chaos, and established peace through superior firepower. But as Commander Zethkar watched his ships being systematically destroyed by creatures he could not understand, he felt something that no Vorthak had experienced in living memory: terror. The human swarms moved through his fleet like a disease. Each group of small ships would surround a Vorthak vessel and begin the methodical process of taking it apart. The attacks were not random or chaotic. They followed a pattern that seemed to come from some alien intelligence that thought in ways no Vorthak could comprehend. Admiral Hay one watched from the bridge of the Persistence as her fleet performed the deadly dance they had practiced for weeks. Her tactical displays showed the locations of every human ship and every Vorthak vessel. The quantum communication network meant that every captain knew exactly what every other captain was doing. Dong Su looked up from his multiple displays. Admiral, 70% of the enemy fleet has been neutralized. We have lost 12 ships total. Hay one nodded. The losses were regrettable, but far less than anyone had expected. The human strategy was working exactly as planned. The Vorthak were helpless against tactics they had never encountered and could not understand. On the monitoring station, the alien observers watched in stunned silence as the most feared military force in the galaxy was systematically dismantled by what looked like a collection of space garbage. This changes everything, whispered General Kethries. The humans have not just defeated the Vorthak, they have made traditional warfare obsolete. The Vorthak battleship Conqueror tried desperately to reach the safety of the fleet center, but human swarms surrounded it like antibodies attacking a virus. Captain Hio Sang led the attack with converted freight haulers that moved through space with impossible coordination. A Conqueror was 2 miles long and carried enough firepower to sterilize a planet, but size and weapons meant nothing when the enemy refused to present a proper target. The human ships were too small to hit effectively, And too numerous to avoid, they are mining us, screamed the Conqueror tactical officer. Sir, they are using industrial equipment to cut through our hull, Captain? Hyo-sang smiled as her ship mining laser carved through Vorthok armor like butter. Her crew had spent 20 years cutting up asteroids for their mineral content. The techniques that worked on space rocks proved equally effective on warships. We are not warriors, she told her crew over the intercom. We are workers, and today our job is demolition. Human approach to warfare was fundamentally different from anything the galaxy had ever seen. Other species fought for honor or territory or ideology. Humans fought the same way they did everything else, as a problem that needed to be solved efficiently. The Vorthok had expected to face an enemy that would meet them in glorious battleship against ship, warrior against warrior. Instead, they found themselves being taken apart by what amounted to a giant construction crew with a demolition contract captain. Legion commanded a group of converted passenger ships that had once carried tourists to scenic space locations. Now they carried miners and engineers who treated the Vorthok fleet like just another job site. His ships surrounded the Vorthok destroyer Vengeance and began their systematic work. Each human vessel had a specific role in the process. Some cut through armor, others disabled weapons systems, still others targeted life support and communication arrays. The Vengeance captain tried every defensive maneuver he knew, but the human ships anticipated his moves before he made them. It was as if they could read his mind or see into the future. What he did not know was that human tactical computers had analyzed centuries of Vorthok battle recordings and could predict their responses with perfect accuracy. Sir, the Vengeance communications officer reported, we cannot break free of their attack pattern. Every time we try to escape, they are already in position to stop us. How is this possible? The answer was simple but revolutionary. The humans had approached warfare the same way they approached every complex problem, by gathering information, analyzing patterns, and developing solutions. The Vorthok fought the way they had always fought, following traditions that had worked for centuries, but humans had no military traditions to limit their thinking. They looked at each battle as a unique engineering challenge that required a custom solution, and they were very, very good at engineering. The Vorthok heavy cruiser Dominator found itself being dissected by human ships that worked with the precision of surgical instruments. Captain Kim So-young led the attack with vessels that had once been deep space research platforms. Her crew consisted of scientists who had spent their careers studying how things worked. Now they applied that knowledge to the question of how to make Vorthok ships stop working. The approach was methodical, logical, and terrifyingly effective. Structural analysis complete. She reported, target the connection points between armor sections that will create maximum system failure with minimum energy expenditure. The human ships moved like they were performing a carefully choreographed ballet. Each vessel knew exactly when and where to strike for maximum effect. The Dominator, massive and powerful, found itself helpless against enemies that fought like no military manual had ever described. On his flagship, Commander Zethkar realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans were not just winning, they were teaching the galaxy that there were other ways to fight wars, ways that made traditional military doctrine completely useless. Status report, he demanded, though he dreaded the answer. Sir, his tactical officer replied, his voice shaking, we have lost 85% of our fleet. The humans continue to destroy our ships faster than we can respond. Their tactics are completely outside our experience. Zethkar looked at the tactical display showing the scattered remains of what had once been the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. The human ships moved through the debris like schools of fish, completely at home in the three-dimensional battlefield of space. How? He whispered, how are they doing this? The answer came from an unexpected source. Admiral. Hey, one voice crackled over the communication system, somehow penetrating the Vorthok encrypted channels. You want to know how? Commander, she said. Her voice was calm, professional, like someone explaining a technical procedure. Is really quite simple. We approach warfare the same way we approach everything else, as a problem that needs to be solved. Carr found himself looking at the human admiral on his main screen. She appeared completely relaxed, sitting in what looked more like a workshop than a military command center. Behind her, you could see crew members who looked more like technicians than soldiers. You fight like you have always fought. She continued following the same patterns, using the same strategies that worked against every other species. But we do not fight like other species, we fight like humans. What does that mean? He demanded, though he was not sure. He wanted to know the answer. It means we are the species that looked at fire and decided to steal it from the gods, she replied. We are the ones who saw the sky and decided we belong there. We looked at every rule in the universe and asked what would happen if we broke it. The human fleet continued its terrible work dismantling the Vorthak vessels with the efficiency of a well-organized construction crew. The attacks were precise, methodical, and utterly without mercy. We do not have grand military traditions or ancient warrior codes, HFY said. What we have is the ability to look at any problem and find a solution. And Commander, you were a problem that needed solving. Zith Carr realized that he was not just facing defeat, he was facing something far worse. He was facing irrelevance. The humans had not just beaten the Vorthak Empire, they had made it obsolete around him. His bridge crew worked frantically trying to coordinate some kind of response, but there was nothing to respond to. The humans had already won, not through superior firepower or better technology, but through superior thinking. The age of the Vorthak Empire was ending, and it was ending not with a glorious final battle, but with the quiet efficiency of people who had work to do and wanted to get it done properly. Commander Zethkar stood alone on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. The tactical displays showed a scene that would have been impossible to imagine just hours before 200 Vorthak warships had been reduced to 18 damaged vessels limping through space. The humans had accomplished what the entire galaxy had believed impossible. They had not just defeated the Vorthak Empire, they had made it look easy. Final casualty reports, sir, his tactical officer said, the words barely above a whisper. We have lost 182 ships. The humans have lost 31 vessels. Total crew casualties are approaching 2 million. Zethkar felt something break inside him. 2 million Vorthak warriors, some of the finest soldiers in the galaxy, destroyed by creatures who fought like they were solving a mathematical equation. The shame was unbearable. On the monitoring station, the alien observers sat in stunned silence. General Kethrees had stopped trying to understand what he was seeing. The tactical displays showed battle patterns that defied every principle of warfare he had ever learned. How did they coordinate those attacks? He asked. Nobody in particular. There was no central command, no battle plan, no traditional communication. They moved like a single organism, but acted like independent units. Admiral Vextar shook his head slowly. The implications of what they had witnessed were staggering. The humans had not just won a battle, they had invented an entirely new form of warfare. This tactical doctrine spreads to other species, he said. The entire balance of power in the galaxy will shift. Everything we know about military strategy becomes obsolete. Admiral HFY opened a communication channel to the remaining Vorthak ships. Her image appeared on their screens, and she looked exactly the same as she had at the beginning of the battle. Calm, professional, completely in control. Commander Zethkar, she said, I believe we need to discuss terms. Zethkar looked at the human woman who had just destroyed his empire. She was small, unremarkable, looking more like a maintenance worker than a military genius, but her dark eyes held something that made him feel cold. What terms? He asked. What do you want? HFY smiled slightly. The expression was not cruel or triumphant. It was the smile of someone who had just finished a difficult job and done it well. We want you to go home, she said simply. Pack up your remaining ships, withdraw from all occupied territories, and return to your own space. Zethkar felt confusion mix with his rage. That cannot be all. You have defeated us completely. You could demand anything. Tribute, slaves, the surrender of our entire fleet. The human admiral nodded. You are absolutely right, Commander. We could demand all of those things, but we do not want them. We want you to leave and never come back. She leaned forward slightly, and her voice became harder. But understand this, Commander, if you ever threaten innocent people again, if you ever try to build another empire on slavery and conquest, we will find you. And next time we will not be so merciful. Zethkar realized that the humans were not interested in conquest or domination. They had fought not for glory or territory, but simply to stop the Vorthak from hurting others. It was a concept so alien to his way of thinking that he could barely comprehend it. You would let us go, he asked. Way because we are not you, HFY replied. We do not fight for the joy of fighting, we fight to solve problems, and the problem was not the Vorthak people. The problem was, the Vorthic Empire. She gestured to the wreckage floating around them. Your empire's finished, Commander. Your military doctrine has been proven obsolete. Your reputation for invincibility is destroyed. Return to your homeworld and find a new way to live. A way that does not involve enslaving others. The communication ended, leaving Zethkar staring at a blank screen. For the first time in his life, he did not know what to do. The humans had not just defeated him, they had rendered everything he believed in meaningless. On the human ships, the crews were already beginning cleanup operations. The battle was over, but there was still work to do. Damaged vessels needed repair, debris needed to be cleared, injured personnel needed medical attention. Captain Jin Ho guided his mining ship through the wreckage field. His crew was using their industrial equipment to break down the larger pieces of debris into manageable chunks. The same tools that had destroyed the Vorthic fleet were now being used to clean up the battlefield. Strange to think that a few hours ago we were at war, he said to his crew. Now we are just doing maintenance work. His crew laughed, but there was truth in his words. The humans had approached warfare as just another job that needed to be done efficiently and professionally. Now that the job was finished, they returned to their normal work routines. Admiral Hey, one walked through the corridors of the Persistence, checking on her crew. Many of them were already back to their regular duties, maintaining equipment, monitoring systems, preparing reports. The transition from combat to normal operations was seamless. She found Dong Su in the communication center, still monitoring multiple channels while eating another rice ball. His station looked exactly the same as it had during the battle. Any word from the Vorthic fleet? She asked. They are withdrawing, Admiral. All remaining ships are leaving the system. The Vorthic commander has sent a message to his home government recommending immediate peace negotiations. Hey. One nodded. The battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. The galaxy would need time to understand what had happened here. The implications of human tactical doctrine would ripple through every military organization in known space. On the Council monitoring station, the observers were frantically sending reports to their home governments. The recordings of the battle would be studied for decades. Military academies would need to completely rewrite their curricula. General Keth Reese looked at the sensor displays showing the human fleet regrouping and beginning rescue operations. They had won the most significant military victory in galactic history, and they were treating it like a routine maintenance task. I do not understand these humans, he said to Admiral Vextar. They show no signs of triumph or celebration. It is as if they simply completed a scheduled job. Admiral Vextar watched the human ships moving through space with the same calm efficiency they had shown during the battle. Perhaps that is exactly what they did, she replied. Perhaps to them this was just another problem that needed solving. The human fleet began forming up for the journey home. Their ships still looked like converted civilian vessels held together with improvised modifications, but now the galaxy knew the truth about those ungainly craft. They were not just ships, they were weapons of a new kind of warfare. As the last human vessel disappeared into hyperspace, Commander Zethkar was left alone with the wreckage of his empire. The Vorthic fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was gone, destroyed by enemies who fought like no warriors in history. But the humans had given him something unexpected: hope. They had shown him that there were other ways to live, other ways to solve problems besides conquest and domination. The age of the Vorthic Empire was over. But perhaps that was not entirely a bad thing. In the depths of space, the debris from the battle continued to drift slowly outward. Eventually, it would be collected and recycled into new materials. For peaceful purposes, even the wreckage would serve a constructive purpose, just like the humans had taught the galaxy that war itself could be turned into something constructive, a tool for solving problems rather than creating them. The galaxy would never be the same. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Kepler 442, and representatives from every major species in the galaxy had gathered to witness something unprecedented: the complete restructuring of galactic military doctrine. Ambassador Kyung Ho stood at the center of the hall, exactly where he had stood when he first proposed that humans face the Vorthic Empire. But now the atmosphere was completely different. Then the aliens had looked at him with dismissal and contempt. Now they looked at him with something approaching awe. The battle recordings played on massive displays that surrounded the hall, showing scenes that military experts were still trying to understand human ships. Moving like living creatures, coordinating without apparent communication, destroying enemies through methods that no academy had ever taught council. Prime Zelthan raised his crystal arms for silence when he spoke. His voice carried a weight that had not been there before. The galaxy has been forever changed by what we witnessed in the Kepler system. The humans have not simply won a battle. They have redefined what warfare means. Around the hall, delegates from dozens of species nodded in agreement. The recordings had been studied by every military organization in known space. War colleges had held emergency sessions to try to understand the new paradigms. The old textbooks had become obsolete. Overnight, General Kethrus of the Altarian fleet spoke first, his 4 eyes moving between the displays and the human ambassador. Your tactics defy every principle of military science. How did ships coordinate so perfectly without central command? How did you maintain such precise formations while moving so chaotically? Kyung Ho smiled slightly, the same calm expression that had irritated so many aliens during their first meeting. Because we were not using formations, General, we were following principles every human ship knew. The mission understood their role and could adapt when circumstances changed. He gestured to the recordings still playing on the displays. You see formations and think they are chaotic. We see coordination and know it is purposeful. Every human learns to work independently. While being part of a team, we do not need rigid command structures because every person is trained to think for themselves. Admiral Vextar of the Nexari stood, his silver skin reflecting the light from the displays. But how do you train entire crews to think identically? How do you ensure that independent thinking does not lead to chaos? That is where you misunderstand us, Ambassador Kyung Ho replied. We do not think identically, we think cooperatively. Every human ship captain makes their own decisions based on their understanding of the situation, but they make those decisions while knowing what every other captain is thinking. The quantum communication networks, he explained, are not just for sharing information. They create a shared awareness that allows independent action within cooperative frameworks. Each ship is free to act, but they act with perfect knowledge of what their teammates are doing. The implications were staggering. Every species in the galaxy had developed military doctrines based on rigid hierarchies and predetermined strategies. The humans had proven that there were other ways to organize and coordinate. Military Forces Commander Yithkal of the Centauri Alliance raised a tentacle toward the displays. What about your weapons? She asked. Your ships used industrial equipment, mining lasers, construction tools, civilian technology. How can such improvised weapons be more effective than purpose-built military hardware? Kyung Ho nodded thoughtfully. Because we did not think of them as improvised weapons. We thought of them as tools being used for their intended purpose. A mining laser is designed to cut through rock efficiently. A construction welder is designed to join metal precisely. These tools worked exactly as they were supposed to work. He paused, letting the implications sink in. The difference is that we looked at the problem differently. You saw military targets that needed to be destroyed with military weapons. We saw engineering challenges that needed to be solved with appropriate tools. The alien delegates exchanged glances as they began to understand. The humans had not revolutionized warfare by developing new weapons. They had revolutionized it by refusing to accept the arbitrary distinction between civilian and military technology. The recordings showed human ships attaching to Vorthak vessels and systematically dismantling them. It looked like warfare, but it was actually construction work applied to the problem of taking things apart.